Oguz A, Professor of Marketing and Innovation at King's College, London, that will perform the talk with Bob Bastian, Assistant Professor of Entrepreneurship and Design here in Politecnico di Milano. You will know both of them in a while, but let me say that the research that they have performed recently has been recognized by Harvard Business Review, to the point that one of the models that they are going to share has been published in that journal that, as you know, is one of the most renowned in the world. And we are more than curious in knowing how we can deal, or how we can rely on AI in order to manage uncertainty that, as I was mentioning at the really beginning, is a kind of enemy or a kind of companion you have to deal with in any kind of future-making endeavor. Similarly to what we have lived with Thomas, we will rely on the same poll application in order to collect questions that you may have for Oguz and Bob. But similarly, as done by Giovanni a few seconds ago, you will be more than welcome in simply open your mic at the end of the talk in order to share possible curiosity. So finally, let me thank Oguz and Bob for the gift that they are giving to us in a while. And similarly to Thomas, I'm more than curious in listening to you.
Wonderful. Shall I share my slides?
That will be perfect.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much for the lovely introduction. Let me share my slides. Can you see my slides all right?
Perfectly.
Can you hear me all right as well?
Super. Yeah.
Wonderful.
We can.
Thanks again, Claudio, for the wonderful introduction and giving us a platform to talk about our paper. We always like the opportunity to discuss this paper. Our discussion today will revolve around AI uncertainty, and we will introduce a toolkit to navigate that. This is based on our HBR paper with the amazing Bob Bastian. So, AI uncertainty. I think it's a reality that many of us are facing now in businesses, and in fact in our personal lives as well. So wherever I give a presentation about AI, especially recently, and be it the audience and executives, students, educators, the number one question that comes to me is like, are we in an AI bubble? Right? I'm sure you heard or maybe thought about this question yourself. Then, it follows up. Is this a hype? Is it going to live up to the expectations? And on the other end of it, another super common question is that, oh, is this going to replace us? Is artificial super intelligence is coming? What does it mean for the job market, right? There are two ends of it. Like on the one hand, is it going to be really not be a big deal? Is the bubble? On the other hand, we have this kind of artificial super intelligence, artificial general intelligence. There are different terms and they mean different things, but there's a lot of uncertainty. And in a way, we are used to uncertainty, right? Uncertainty is around us. It's part and parcel of the life. It's a reality. But sometimes, or often, you actually at least have some possible scenarios. You can put some rough probabilities on them to estimate what might happen. But then there is what researchers call radical uncertainty. And it's a situation where you can't describe the future states ex ante, let alone calculating them. And it's basically what AI presents us with. So we are facing, as managers, as educators, we are facing the challenge of predicting inherently unpredictable outcomes with regards to AI. It's really difficult to distinguish what is really achievable, what is kind of science fiction, or what is a distant but plausible possibility. It's very hard. And you're trying to do that while racing against the clock in a very, very fast-paced environment. I mean, it can really be a full-time job to be on top of what's happening. It's just, I spend a lot of time, and part of my job is actually really be on top of these things. And I kind of gave up on being on top of everything that's happening. New models come all the time. And there's a lot of questions around, what do you want to do? Do you want to, at the heart of it is, should you take the leap as an early adopter? Should you wait and observe? That's an uncomfortable leadership question that many managers are facing. So how do we go about it? I think the starting point, and that's what we try to do in this paper as well, is the first step is to first understand, recognize what are the risks, what is the uncertainty here, what kind of uncertainty is with regards to AI that we are facing. And it's not just one kind. We actually identified 3 kinds of uncertainties that could be managed with different strategies. And we first identify the strategy, the uncertainty that we call state uncertainty. And state uncertainty, as we define, is the uncertainty around where AI is going, where this technology is going. It's when managers lack sufficient information to predict AI market trends and change. So it is primarily about, as AI evolves rapidly, it's really difficult to distinguish between, what is achievable now, what remains impossible, what remains, very difficult. And it's even more daunting, even if you're following AI field, because AI experts often have widely different views on critical questions. Right? So, like some of the technical questions, without going into too much detail, does scaling AI has limits? So you go and talk to Demis Hassabis from Google, who's one of, Nobel laureate, who's one of the top experts in this field. He thinks that, it might be the core or even sole pathway to AGI. Scaling, just kind of putting more and more data in making bigger and bigger models is maybe the sole pathway to AGI. Whereas when you go and talk to Jan LeCun, who was the head of AI in Meta, he would think that, their LLMs will bring diminishing returns, so it can't be just about scaling it. So there are a lot of questions like this, like, can AI confabulations ever be fixed? Like all these hallucinations, all these kind of silly, stupid answers that you get from AI, are they ever going to be fixed? And people have different views on that as well. Or now the big topic is the buzzword, or the most exciting thing in the field is AI agents. Will they be, and they do some good jobs in narrow tasks, but you don't know whether they are going to be ever efficient or effective to complete major tasks within an organization. So that is about the state uncertainty, where this technology is going. And we also have effect uncertainty. So this is about, the first one was about the technology itself, right? This one is about, what does it mean for your business? What kind of impact it will have to your specific business? Is this going to disrupt your industry, or just going to be another tool? Or, there are other kind of questions around this. What does those narrow benchmarks that AI Labs report with limited real world relevance mean for your business? What does an increased context window in upcoming models mean for your industry? So there's a lot of things in terms of, we see some developments in the field, like maybe you are also following or noticing these leaderboards, right? So all these models that are put on a leaderboard, and there's some kind of benchmarks in the columns, like MMLU. But what does it mean for my business, right? So they might have like 10% increase in that particular score, but this is many of those benchmarks are like exam style quizzes, right? History questions, like biology questions, grade school maths. What is that? That's useful for researchers to kind of assess it, but it doesn't automatically mean that I'm going to have 10% more increase when you're using AI to run your call center, right? So there's a difference between what it can do in those benchmarks versus what it can do in your industry. We have very limited contextual benchmarks, right? So what does it mean, for example, if you're in finance and if you're looking at the accuracy of kind of summarizing a finance document, those kind of benchmarks. We have very few of them, and they're primarily at the kind of research level, researchers suggesting some potential benchmarks. So there's an affects uncertainty. And then we have response uncertainty. As if the first two uncertainties were not enough to navigate and deal with, we also have the uncertainty around how do we react? Like what should be our own response? And it primarily revolves around, should you kind of take the leap as an early adopter, go and try something new, or kind of wait and observe and see for the dust to settle a little bit? And it can, again, you can also think about other questions that relates to response uncertainty, such as, should you focus on cost cutting, augmenting human capabilities, automation versus augmentation? Or if you go a bit more technical side, should you build your custom models, fine tune existing ones, or use techniques like RAG? And let me give you an example of why this answer to this question is not very obvious. You know Bloomberg, and maybe you've heard of the model that they have developed based on their proprietary data, Bloomberg GPT. So they have developed 50 billion parameter model trained on decades of proprietary financial data that they have. Right? That sounds like a very good idea, right? They're very proactive. And they spent reportedly around 10 million on that. And then a few months later, GPT developed a new model, GPT-4, back at that time. And then researchers from Queen's University and JP Morgan looked at the performance of Bloomberg GPT versus GPT-4, and then compared that performance in standard financial text tasks, sentiments on earning calls, etc., etc. GPT-4, a general model that you can access with £20 or $20, with no access to that proprietary data, outperformed Bloomberg GPT on virtually every benchmarks they tested. Right? So the question is, it's not obvious. You want to think about, it's not just do we build, do we buy, do we wait, but it's really thinking about when you're running and investing on some course of action, you need to take into account this technology is evolving rapidly. So do you want to really put on like £10 million bet on anything? So, okay, now we're not just going to describe what the strategies are. We will also give some ideas as to how to navigate them. So we don't want to just kind of gloomy picture here. And we have I think, very good suggestion here. Here's how we go about it. Right, but really, this is how many organizations are trying to do today. It's kind of funny. Most of these cartoons from this guy, Tom Fishburne, is mostly often funny because they are very true. In all honesty, if we are serious again, how can managers actually tackle these uncertainties in a structured way? So drawing on research, including our own work, and on projects with companies, we've landed on 4 practical approaches, and we've given them very simple names: seeing, thinking, doing, and shaping. On this chart, the vertical axis about the focus. So at the bottom, you are looking mainly inside the organization, your people, your capabilities, your data. On top, you're looking at the outside, markets, competitors, and the technology. The horizontal axis is about proactivity. On the left, you're more reflective, like understanding, analyzing. On the right, you're more active, taking more concrete steps, running experiments. So each quadrant gives us one strategy. And of course, we need to end up with a 2x2 as business school professors, right? So this is our 2x2 for that. So thinking is about looking inward in a reflective way, making sense of what's already happening or what's happened. Doing is about inward, but active, experiments, pilots, and so on. Seeing is outward and reflective, so scanning the horizon, foresight, and so on. And shaping is about outward and active, working on actually shaping the course of AI trajectory for your industry. So none of these is the best. The point is really combining them and matching with the right kind of uncertainty types that we have discussed. So with this overview in mind, I'll now hand this over to Bob, who will unpack each of these 4 strategies.
Thank you very much, Oguz. I don't know if you want to keep moving the slides for me while
I can do that. Hopefully
yeah.
we can sync properly, but let's try.
We 2 great minds together. So good evening, everyone. So to like scope a bit more into the details of these 4 strategies that Oguz already described, not only in what they are, but we also thought about what managers could do for each strategy, and we also found examples of each of them. So one of the 4 strategies is what we call thinking, and with thinking, what we really mean is this internal and reflective approach that managers may use for their own mental models, in which they evaluate past successful scenarios to make sense of the present. So what we're saying here is that if the future is so uncertain and if the unknowns are so various, then probably it works better to see what worked in the past. So, for example, a consultant that could advise a client on generative AI could recall a past project where automation might have failed because the team might have chased a technology rather than solving a real business problem. So using this kind of mental model, using this kind of thinking, a manager could challenge his own thinking and making sense of the past by thinking about your own thinking. So what we're saying is that when you are in doubt, you may actually break through it by questioning what you already know and what has happened in the past. So the ability to think about your own thinking. And a nice example that we found in our research is that Microsoft shifted initially from fragmented chatbot experiments to some kind of unified AI platform that is nowadays quite successful. And the turning point was really a new way of thinking. So what the leaders of Microsoft basically did was that they revisited past AI and software rollouts, including the ones that failed, so the failures of early chatbot programs like TAI, and they recognized a repeating pattern. So counterintuitively, by slowing down to think, the company actually moved faster. And this illustrates how metacognitive reflection can break through AI uncertainty.
I think it's the time, right?
Yes. If I'm silent for a few seconds, probably
I'll get the hint. Okay.
To not break. So yeah, we're also thinking about thinking. So what could managers concretely do then to apply thinking rather than looking at Microsoft or keeping it on a more abstract level? So what we think here is that what could help people is to interrogate your assumptions before committing to an AI direction. So before greenlighting an initiative as a manager, you may start with identifying the assumptions that drive your confidence, or on the other end, your hesitation. So you could ask, for example, what would need to be true for this to fail? And this would help you to identify blind spots. But you could also ask the very famous bias-breaking questions, such as, what assumption am I basing this on? And what if it's wrong? So in practical terms, what we see is that managers could extract, for example, 3 to 5 lessons from earlier tech shifts and apply them to current AI decisions. Moving on, while thinking draws more on past experience and reflection, so also on the type of uncertainty that does not allow to look much into the future, seeing is about looking ahead and visualizing potential future developments. So this means to explore what the future could look like and prepare the organization for specific AI futures that might unfold. So we know this from foresight and future scenario planning studies. So we found in our research, and actually it's another paper that is soon out from Oguz and me, as a case study on ASML. We found various companies that use foresight to shape their strategies under uncertainty, but perhaps one of the most stunning examples is the semiconductor giant ASML, based in the Netherlands, and they are actively and regularly engaging with their clients to understand their long-term aspirations, to identify issues that the customers may have, not only customers that they currently have, but issues that might come in the future. So one of the main particular things that Oguz and I found was that ASML is actively visiting their customers and their suppliers to identify risks that they haven't identified themselves yet, so that they can already devise scenarios to address these challenges. So to cope with AI uncertainty, ASML in this sense strives to go beyond generating immediate customer insights, and they additionally focus on tapping into what we call the future aspirations of their clients' visions and futures. So this means understanding and aligning on long-term product roadmaps, but for example, also on anticipating long-term challenges that clients themselves may not have recognized. And this is what we can call maybe the customer or the supplier's unknown unknowns. So seeing and especially what managers should do when they want to apply seeing in practice is what we see as a way forward, especially learning from the ASML case, is that managers could build 3 distinctive AI futures: an optimistic one, a moderated one, and a disruptive one. And preparing for an optimistic, moderating, and disrupting future could also help to stress test. And this could reveal where your current plans are robust, but also on the other end, and perhaps more importantly, where they are still fragile and what capabilities you may need to build in your organization. So if your strategy fails in one or even more scenarios, that signals a vulnerability. And this could highlight which capabilities you lack today in order to prioritize your strategies. So you could, for example, ask, would our value proposition still hold? And what capabilities would we need? And what risk emerge? So one of the things that we see as a practical approach to seeing for managers is that the managers could refresh scenarios every 6 or 12 months. So the moment that Oguz and I actually wrote this article, it has been published a year ago, but we started writing it 1.5 years ago. So some of the things and examples here might already be outdated again since AI moves so fast. So it's very relevant for managers to frequently update scenarios every few months, and update plans as AI capability accelerate and new patterns emerge. So keep being updated about what you may see, not just today, but also what customers may want in 5 or 10 years. Now, moving a bit away from the thinking, of course, handling uncertainty around AI does not only imply thinking about it, but it also means doing things. So what we mean with doing is we see it as an active approach that helps managers to focus on the internal environment, so the organization itself, and focus on active experimentation with your organization. So this is particularly useful for managers in high uncertain contexts, because experimentation allows to rapidly pilot your way through and to test what works and what does not work, and is also often viewed as the best strategy in new radical markets or when new radical developments unfold. Moderna, now after the COVID pandemic, probably known to almost everyone, is a nice example of experimentation with AI. So rather than waiting for the perfect AI clarity or the AI certainty that will never really be there, Moderna has built more than 3,000 customized GPTs across its business, and each of a small, rapid experiment created by employees to solve specific checks or regularly flow checks. So employees of Moderna are constantly experimenting themselves in what we can call little micro experiments to see what works and what works not. And even though if many prototypes actually fail, the cost of experimentation is relatively low, and so low that each attempt becomes a data point. So the few advantages or the few experiments that work are actually greatly benefiting Moderna against the many experiments that do not work, but also do not cost a lot. So what could managers then do? Of course, we think that similarly as we saw before, they could run multiple small AI pilots. They could run several experiments instead of betting on a few big ones. So managers could launch 3 or 5 low-risk AI pilots, and they could, for example, prioritize speed of learning over perfect design. And so your team could be encouraged to test 5 or 10 lightweight AI experiments at the same time, while you could probably assume that only 20 or 30 of them will succeed. What we also see is that empowering teams with safe tools. So for example, if you would give non-technical employees access with oversight to low-risk tools, you could give the front line to your employees to control access and to build their own mini AI solutions. So one of the practical ways forward that we see is that managers could set out, for example, a 30-day pilot rule in which the scaling fast wins and the weaker ones that do not work are killed rather quickly. And then lastly, shaping. And shaping is also the most proactive way. So when managers already feel some kind of confidence in the uncertainty around AI that they want to follow, the strategy that they want to pursue, is a proactive and externally focused approach that we find especially helpful for navigating AI market trends and predicting how these trends and changes might transform businesses into the future. So managers that adopt this approach, they go beyond reacting to uncertainty, but they actually work their way through the technology of the industry. So they work towards guiding the development of market knowledge and beliefs to align with their company's strategic vision. So what we find here, a good example is Walmart, the US company, that not just responds to changes, so waits until other competitors do so, but Walmart is actively shaping market expectations. So just a month ago, October 2025, Walmart announced a formal partnership with OpenAI, and this allows them to allow their customers to shop directly via ChatGPT. So the platform can have an instant checkout feature. And one of the main benefits of this collaboration between ChatGPT and Walmart is that they now know exactly what customers want, because customers are exactly be able to describe what they need. So the AI, based on these recommendations, can build a strategy and internal recommendations to handle checkouts, to build up recommendation cards, and to make personalized interactions for their customers. So what can we learn then from Walmart? To conclude, what can managers do to shape their strategy? Well, we see that especially the strategic alliances with AI leaders are very useful here, especially in the early stages. So partner up with AI labs, with universities that are concerned with AI research, such as King's College of Oguz, vendors, but also consortia and other influencing tools to evolve and not just adopt them, so that you're on the front line of understanding what technology will do in the future. And you may start, for example, with identifying one strategic partner, one strategic AI partner, to engage early in developing your capabilities and not just to consume them later. You could also co-create with customers, as we saw from Walmart. So you could invite selected customers to actually participate in AI-generated programs, or to co-develop pilots with your future customers. So you could invite your key clients into these pilots to jointly explore the emerging value propositions that you wish to offer in the future. And with that being said, I guess that our main conclusion is that managers should embrace uncertainty, as the uncertainty as something positive and not just as a risk. So turn your AI uncertainty into an opportunity. And navigating this means dealing with a toolkit of strategies that hopefully we gave to you, and especially to combine the strategies that we use. So we're starting from the thinking that we see as a solid foundation, and while doing and seeing enable you to experiment and test. In the end, when the time is right, probably most managers want to shape and use shaping, because this offers the opportunity to actively influence the market and to steer the future trajectories of AI. So we believe that adopting a combination of these strategies is essential for turning your AI uncertainty into an opportunity.